Okay, so I'm gonna start with a personal reflection. Last night, as I often do, I live not far from the Tayelet in Yerushalayim, which overlooks the Ir HaAtika, overlooks the old city. We can see Rabbi from there, um, and for the last 14 years, and if I've been in Israel, then I've been there on Tish B'av at night with my kehillah. We say Echan Kinot at night, literally overlooking Har HaBayit. Inevitably, we are always interrupted by a muezzin coming from wherever. Actually, there are multiple muezzins, and truth is, for many many years, one of the questions that has been banging in the back of my head, and I can say that it probably is on the minds of lots of people who are there. We're looking out, we're seeing a very beautiful sight. We're seeing Yerushalayim as it has never been before. There are more people living in Yerushalayim today than at any point in all of Jewish history. Certainly more Jews living in Yerushalayim than at any point in all of Jewish history. There's more Torah and Chesed and a lot of good things that are happening than has ever happened in all of Jewish history. And it seems sometimes it feels a little incongruous as we're looking out over this beautiful sight. And we're sitting on the ground and reading Eicha in a mournful tone, and saying the keynote in mournful tones. And a lot of the people who are around me, many of them are Israelis, native-born Israelis who grew up here. They have a hard time with Tisha B'av. They say, we're here, so what are we mourning? And truth is, I have felt that on and off over the course of the years. And unfortunately, the last year or two, I have a very profound sense of what we're mourning, which is very different.
Wall Street.
I get this sense that on some level, many of the conditions that brought about the Khurban in the first place are repeating themselves, and I'm quite concerned about that. And I feel that in very profound kinds of ways. But it's an issue that burns for many, many Israelis, especially. Tisha B'av is a day filled with contradictions, and I think part of what goes on in the thinking, in trying to formulate some kind of intelligent response, is when we say Khurban. So what do we mean? What are we talking about? So when I get up in front of a group of people, and I'm not going to ask you here because I see there are 200 plus people on a Zoom. We are not going to. We don't have the luxury of taking lots of comments. But when I say Khurban, when I get up in front of a group, whether they're adults or teens, and I say Khurban, inevitably the first thing that comes out of people's mouths, Beit HaMikdash. We're talking about the Khurban of the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, I understand the Khurban and how many of them are really distressed about the fact that they don't have a Beit HaMikdash now? Forget everything else, just the Beit HaMikdash and Korbanot. How many of them would be happy to get rid of their shuls and to replace them with Korbanot that they do? They go once or twice a year to the Beit HaMikdash to do their Korbanot, and the rest of the times. And when I ask the question, I get a lot of looks on my face like, "Oh, it means that." I said, "Do you miss the blood? Do you miss the Korbanot?" I mean, do you feel like that would help you connect in a very spiritual way to Hashem? And I get these very uncomfortable stares looking back at me. Okay, so then they start thinking a little bit differently. Oh, we're mourning Yerushalayim. Oh yeah, okay, right. And if you look in the Megillat Eicha, you'll find mourning for the Mikdash. You'll find mourning for Yerushalayim. It opens that way, right? Eicha yashva vadad ha'ir rabati am. Almana. So you find mourning for Yerushalayim. You say, okay, and because Yerushalayim doesn't have Jews living in it, right? Because Yerushalayim is not a thriving city anymore. And all of a sudden we begin to ask, okay, so what are we mourning in Yerushalayim? And then the discussion continues, okay? And it turns out that there are lots and lots of things that people say, and each one of them is a little bit challenging in the contemporary world, the contemporary reality, to use as justification for having a day where we are consumed by this mourning and sadness. And some of the things that are mentioned, they include, and if you take a look in Megillat Eicha, and if you take a look at the end of Sefer Melachim, you'll find these things there, the human suffering, just so much suffering that went into both in the end of the first Beit HaMikdash, the end of the second Beit HaMikdash, and the perpetual state of Galut that we have been in on and off for the last 2,000 years. Okay, so when we talk about statelessness and powerlessness, right, and we know, right, somebody just wrote in here in one of the chat comments, they say Churban refers to the Shoah. So the Shoah is part of that statelessness, part of that powerlessness that defined our existence for nearly 2,000 years. When you put all these things together, every single one of them really is a little, and before, I would say before the year 1948, every single one of these things really held a lot of power. And in the years from 1948 until where we are now, it's hard to look at any one of them and to say, oh, that's what Tisha B'Av is all about. What I'd like to do today with you, this is just by means of introduction, to give a sort of a general background. I want to take a look today at one particular tefillah that we have. It is the tefillah that is unique to Tisha B'Av. Okay, I mean, it's a bracha that we actually say. It's unique to Tisha B'Av. And it is probably the most problematic tefillah, I think, that we have. And I'm going to, if you have the source sheets, so you can open them up. I'm going to be working with the source sheets, but I'm also going to share my screen so you can see exactly what we're talking about. Sometimes it's easier to look at the screen than to look at your source sheets. So I'm just going to take a second here to share my screen so we can all see what is going on. Okay. And here we go. I think I did that right. Okay, so here we have, and there's nothing on the screen that's not in your source sheets. There's nothing in your source sheets that's not on the screen. So you can certainly use either one. I'm going to start with the standard text. This is the one that's printed, standard Ashkenazi text for Nachem. Okay, Nachem we say once on Tisha B'Av. Sfardim say it in every one of the tefillot. But Ashkenazim say this at Mincha, Nachem Hashem Elokeinu et Avelei Tzion vet Avelei Yerushalayim. So Hashem, please comfort. Nachem means comfort. Please comfort the mourners of Tzion and the mourners of Yerushalayim. Vet ha'ir ha'avela v'hachareva v'habzuya v'hashomima, and the city that's in mourning and that's desolate and that's disgraced and that is empty. It's mourning because it doesn't have its children. It is destroyed because it doesn't have homes anymore. It is disgraced because it doesn't have its glory anymore. And it is desolate because it doesn't have anybody living there. It sits and its head is covered in disgrace or covered in mourning. Ki isha akara shelo yalada, like a barren woman who has never given birth. Okay, and then we continue. I'll finish this up. Vayivaluha legionot. It was swallowed up by legions. Vayushua ovdei psilim. Idolaters took it over. Vayatilu et amcha Yisrael acharev. They killed your people. Vayargu v'zadon chasidei elyon. They killed with malice the great righteous people. Al kain Tzion b'marav tivkeh v'Yushalayim titen kolah. That's why Tzion cries bitterly. Yerushalayim gives voice to its sorrow. Libi achalalehem, may I achalalehem. My heart and my guts are just pouring out because of those who died. Ki ata Hashem ba'esh hisata u'va'esh ata atid livnota. You Hashem, you're the one who burned it in fire, and you're going to rebuild it in fire. Ka'amur, as the pasuk says, is a pasuk in Zechariah. V'ani eheyeh la'ne'um Hashem. I, says Hashem, will be for it, for Yerushalayim, chomat eish saviv, a wall of fire all around, ulchavod eheyeh b'torcha, and I will give it glory with my presence in it. Baruch atah Hashem, menachem Tzion uvonei Yerushalayim. Okay, read through and translated the entire thing. Here's the tefillah that's printed in the Sidurim, and truth is, in general, I don't like to lie. I even more anxious about lying to Hashem. And here we have a tefillah that's a lie. And it's printed in every Sidur, and we're expected to say it. Right? Let's just take a look at the opening lines. Nachem Hashem Elokeinu et avelei Tzion v'et avelei Yerushalayim. Please, Hashem, bring comfort to Tzion, to the mourners for Tzion and Yerushalayim. V'ta'ir ha'avela, the city that is mourning. Choreva, it is destroyed. Bizuya, it is disgraced. Shomema, it's desolate. Avela mibli baneha, it has no children. Choreva mima'onoteha, it has no homes. Bizuya mikvoda, it has no glory. Vashomema me'en yoshev, and it's desolate because there's nobody living there. And that's a lie. So we are asked at Mincha, I've already been there. You're getting there later on today. We are asked to lie in our tefillah. Okay, I'm going to rephrase. I don't like that. I think most people don't like that. I'm going to rephrase this in a little kitschy kind of way. We have a pasuk in Al Naharot Bavel, the Perek in Tehillim. Ech nashir et shir Hashem al admat nechar. How can we sing the song of God in a foreign land? And I asked the question, Ech nikonein et kinat hachurban. How can we mourn? How can we mourn the mourning of the churban al admat hatkuma, on the land that has been reborn? And there are more Jews living in this land than ever before. There are more Jews in Yerushalayim. We've been through that. So how can we say this? How can I say this with a straight face? How can I invoke Hashem's name and say these words while I am speaking to Hashem? He knows that it's a lie. I'm not the first one to ask this question. Maybe my formulation is a little bit sharp, but I'm not the first one to ask this question. The first reference that I have found, and it could be there earlier ones, but the first published reference that I have found to addressing the question in general about how we relate to the Churban was presented by Rav Shlomo Yosef Zevin in a book called Hamoadim B'Halacha, first printed in 1954. Okay, so 1954, we are talking pre-67. We're talking 6 years after the establishment of the state. We're talking about when Yerushalayim was a backwater that nobody visited because there was nothing to do in Yerushalayim. Tourists did not go to Yerushalayim. Tourists went to Tel Aviv. If you were religious, you went to the Galil and you went to visit graves. And if you were a Kohen who was a tourist, so you got half of your money's worth. It's Rav Zevin, who was a Hasidic Rebbe, a forward-thinking Hasidic Rebbe. He's talking about, and he has in this book Hamoadim B'Halacha, he goes through halachic issues related to the Jewish calendar, and in his discussion of the fast days and specifically of Tisha B'Av. So one of the halachot that comes up is there is a halacha that some people are aware of, that when you see the mountains of Yerushalayim, you're supposed to tear, and you haven't seen it for 30 days. You're supposed to tear Kriya, Avelut. If you see the walls of Yerushalayim, you haven't seen them for 30 days, you tear Kriya. If you see the Kotel and you haven't seen it in 30 days, you tear Kriya. I mean, the whole series of tearings that we're supposed to do for mourning over the destruction. Rav Zevin writes as follows. This is like the end of his whole discussion of the halacha, and you'll see what I mean by a progressive Hasidic Rebbe. You know, today it sounds a little strange. The first 100 years, every Hasidic Rebbe was progressive. They were all revolutionaries. It's only in the last 75 years, 100 years, that all Hasidic Rebbes have become very conservative, right? But Rav Zevin is a Hasidic Rebbe who is reclaiming his ancient tradition as a Hasidic Rebbe of being a progressive thinker. And he writes as follows, V'chatvu poskim. The poskim wrote as follows, Churbanan shel arei Yehuda hu she'akum moshlim bahem. The Churban of Arei Yehuda, the cities of Yehuda, is that idolaters are in charge of them. Akum means idolaters, and there's a typo here. That's why the word Yehuda appears twice. It's my typo, not his. So the Churban of Yerushalayim is that they are of the cities of Yerushalayim, because you have it for the mountains of Yerushalayim, you have it for the cities, the mountains of Yehuda, the cities of Yehuda, the old city of Yerushalayim, the walls. You have it for Harabayit, right? The tearing of Kriya. So the poskim wrote, and he quotes his poskim over here, is that the Churban is that they are governed by idolaters. Okay, not just non-Jews, but Ovdei Kochavim, people who worship idolatry. Mistaber, makes sense, he writes, Shem Shichruran Shel Arei Yehuda Mishilton Nochrim. Now that the cities of Yehuda have been liberated from the dominion of foreigners, V'hakamat Medinat Yisrael, and the establishment of Medinat Yisrael, Ashreinu Shezachinu Lechach. Boy, are we fortunate that we've seen that. Batel din bikriya al otan he'arim. So Rav Zevin is prepared to entertain the notion that a long-standing halacha about tearing kriya maybe should no longer be long-standing, because if I see Kiryat Ye'arim, well, Kiryat Ye'arim was a biblical city, but now it's called Tellstone, and you've got thousands of people living there. You know, I go through all of the cities of Yehuda, Hebron, right? Meaning all these places that have lots of Jews living in them, right? So, okay, there are Jews living in them. They're no longer under the dominion of foreigners. So he says maybe the din of Kriya should be batel, should be nullified. Now, just as a side note, this is what Rav Zevin wrote in 1954. In the late 1970s, his book was translated into English by ArtScroll. This passage does not appear in the translation. I'll leave it at that. You can draw your own conclusions. But Rav Zevin here, already in 1954, is prepared to look at, right? We have all these things that we do for Churban, right? Including Kriya, and maybe we have to start re-exploring them. Maybe we have to start rethinking what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in terms of the modern reality. When it comes time to the tefillah of Nachem, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So we find changes to the tefillah in Nachem, and here are two that I'm going to share with you to start with. Two changes that try to make sure that we can say this with a straight face and not feel guilty about lying during davening. Okay, and these two suggestions are actually quite minor. They came about approximately the same time. One is from Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, and he was after 1967, he was very bothered by this tefillah. And Rav Lichtenstein was, on the one hand, an extraordinary thinker, and on the other hand, also very traditional. I mean, he was very progressive in some ways, and he was very traditional in other ways. His training in Chaim Berlin left a very profound impact on him. But he felt like he couldn't say the words that were printed in the Siddur. So let's just take a look at what Rav Lichtenstein did to the Tefillah of Nachem so that he could say it with a clear conscience. And I believe this is from 1968, maybe 1969. Nachem Hashem Elokeinu et Avelei Tzion et Avelei Yerushalayim. So far, it's identical. If you have the other text in front of you, you can see that the words are identical. Ve'ta'ir ha'avela v'hachareva v'habezuya v'hashomima. Identical. V'hi yoshevet v'rosha chafui. She's sitting and her head is covered. Kisha. The continuation is also identical, word for word. What did Rav Lichtenstein do? He removed 4 phrases. Ha'avela mibni vaneha, chareva mima'onoteha, bizuya me'en kavod, shomema me'en yoshev. Those 4 phrases, which are the expansion of these words, Rav Lichtenstein said, I can't say those. I can't say the words Avela mibni vaneha because Yerushalayim has lots of Jews living it, and I'm going to be moving there also within a year or two. Right? Chareva, right? Mima'onoteha. It's not true. There are lots of homes, and lots of Jewish homes in Yerushalayim. Bizuya, I can't say it has no dignity, it has no kavod. It's the capital of the Jewish people. It's got the Knesset. It's got. I can't say those things. Shomeima me'in yoshev. It's desolate. So he was prepared to say the words Avela chareva bizuya shomeima, because now you can interpret those any way you want. So what makes Yerushalayim Avel? I'm not going to tell you. You figure that out for yourself. What makes Yerushalayim considered to be charev, destroyed? You figure that one out. Bizuyad, it doesn't have its kavod. You can figure out all the things that you want. Everybody can have their own kavanot in there, right? So I can say those words, and I can say those words with a clean conscience. But I can't say the words that came afterwards, which were the original author's interpretation of those. So he simply removes those 4 phrases and leaves the rest of the tefillah intact. The progressive side of and the side that demanded truth of Rav Lichtenstein wouldn't allow him to say the phrases he thought were false, but the traditional side led him to leave every other word intact. A similar approach, in some ways even more conservative, was taken by the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, Rav Chaim David Halevi. In Israel, people know about Rav Chaim David Halevi. In Chutz La'aretz, people don't know so much about him. He was a really interesting and very colorful figure. He wrote shuvot about some of the strangest topics you could imagine. He also had a problem with the Tefillah of Nachem. And what he did was he changed, or he inserted, one word. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein solved this problem by removing 4 phrases. Rav Chaim David Halevi left all the phrases in there, but inserted one word. Let's see what word he inserts. Nachem Hashem Elokeinu et Avelei Tzion ve'et Avelei Yerushalayim ve'et ha'ir shahaita chareva.
Excuse me, we're not seeing that on the screen.
The city that was. He just solved his problem. I can say this with a clear conscience. I'm not lying, because the city was Avela, it was Chareva, it was Bizuya, it was Shomema. It was all of those things. That's true. And then he continues with the tefillah as it is. So he solved his problem, right? Problem is, I don't like to lie. I put in the word shahaita. I'm not lying anymore. I have a clear conscience. What's missing from both of these suggestions? Right? They're both interesting, and they both deal with the problem that I presented to you. Is I don't like to lie, and I certainly don't like to lie when I'm speaking to Hashem. So they both solve that problem, each in their own way. Rav Lichtenstein by removing 4 phrases, Rav Chaim David Halevi by inserting a word, but there's something missing. You solve the problem. The text is no longer problematic. But making it no longer problematic also takes away some of its meaning. What's the value in saying, Hashem, bring comfort to a city that was once in mourning? It's like me going over to somebody and say, you lost your parent like 30 years ago, right? Can I be menachem you? There's something there that's just missing. It's tefillah that doesn't have almost a purpose. It's there because we're used to saying it, but you've just robbed it of its purpose. So they fixed the problem of lying, but in the process of doing so, they also rendered the tefillah a little bit impotent. Well, guess what? These are not the only 2 Jewish luminaries who looked at this tefillah and had difficulty with it. Going backwards in time just a little bit, there's a fellow by the name of Avraham Rosenfeld. He was a British rabbi. He was a rabbi for a while in New Zealand, I think in Wellington, New Zealand. Very interesting guy, very interesting background. Many of you are familiar with him, even if you don't know his name. He was one of the first to publish a kinah for the Shoah. He wasn't the first to write. There were many who wrote, but they didn't publish them. He was one of the first to publish a kinah for the Shoah. But not only did he publish a kinah for the Shoah, he was actually the first to publish a full translation of the keynote. It was a massive piece of work. The work has been imitated since, right? So you have now from many publishing houses. Art Scroll did one. Koren has done one. There are probably others that are out there as well that have done translations of the keynote. He was the first to do a full-blown translation of the keynote with wonderful notes and annotated. And he published it in 1965. The significance of that is that this is before the Six-Day War, before 1967. And before 1967, Rav Avraham Rosenfeld, who published this book in England, when he published it in England, it was a small little volume with a nondescript black cover. Now it's a rare book. You can't find it anymore. But he published the regular Tefillah of Nachem, and then published next to it, says, here's an alternative version. Because already in 1965, when Yerushalayim is still split, he felt like there was a problem with the Tefillah. And here is his version of the Tefillah. And you'll see that he was much more willing to make changes than either Rav Chaim David Halevi or Rav Aaron Lichtenstein. He writes as follows: Nachem Hashem Elokeinu et avelei Tzion ve'et avelei Yerushalayim. Starts exactly the same way. I'm gonna just skip for a second and just go to the end. If you go to one line before the end, Va'ani, in the middle of the one line before the end, Va'ani eheyeh laneum Hashem chomat eish saviv ulchavod eheyeh betocha. Okay, so I'm not sure who's writing on the. Maybe it's probably by accident that somebody's writing on the screen share.
Yeah, if anybody knows how to get rid of that, please let me know, because that thing I don't think I know. But yeah, if you could stop, that would be great.
I'm sure that somebody knows how to get rid of it.
Right, so just, you can write me a message and then I can figure out.
Okay. So he starts exactly the same way as the regular Tefillah of Nachem. He ends exactly the same way, which means that as much as he's uncomfortable with what it says inside, he maintains the overall framework. It has to start and end the same. That's the ultimate structure of the bracha, right? It has an opening, has a closing. The closing is supposed to mirror the opening. So he maintains the opening and the closing. But let's take a look at what he does with it after that opening. Okay, so I'm back to the first line. Nachem Hashem Elokeinu avelei Tzion v'et avelei Yerushalayim v'et ha'ir. So first, the mourners of Tzion Yerushalayim, v'et ha'ir ha'kedosha. And please Hashem, please bring nechama, bring comfort to the holy city. Hamevaka al amecha Yisrael. That holy city is crying for Yisrael, asher hutal lecharev. They have been put to the sword. In this, already, he has broken new ground over here. Instead of those 4 words, avela, chareva, shomema, etc., right? He's changed that. Because none of that are words that he can say. He says, Yerushalayim is mourning for all of its children who have died throughout the course of history. The focus has completely shifted. When I opened, I pointed out that there are a lot of different ways of looking at the Churban. You can look at the Beit HaMikdash, you can look at Yerushalayim, you can look at a Jewish powerlessness, you can look at the loss of Eretz Yisrael, at the loss of independence. He looks at the loss of Jewish life. Rabbi Rosenfeld, that is the greatest tragedy of all. Okay? Ha'ir ha'kedosha mevaka al amecha Yisrael asher hutal lecharev. They have been put to sword. V'al chasidei elyon, and the very righteous ones, shenehergu v'zadon. So that phrase appears in the original Nachem, but in a different place. V'al giborei Yisrael, and for the heroes, shemasru nafshem al kedushat Hashem. Right? Look what he's doing over here. The entire focus has shifted. You know why Yerushalayim needs comforting? Yerushalayim needs comforting because so many have died for Yerushalayim. Now, you could be talking about the times of the first Beit HaMikdash. You could be talking about the times of the second Beit HaMikdash. You can be talking about the Bar Kokhba rebellion. You can be talking about the Crusades. You could be talking about the Muslim invasion. You could be talking about 1948. You can be talking about the riots in 1929. They all died al Kiddush Hashem. So what Rav Rosenfeld has done over here, he switches the focus, and by switching the focus, he makes the tefillah timeless. The focus is not on the city. The focus is not on the walls. The focus is not on the Beit HaMikdash. The focus is on the people who suffered because they lived in Yerushalayim, because they were associated with Yerushalayim, because they defended Yerushalayim. Tzion b'mar tivkev Yerushalayim titein kola. Libi, libi al chalalehem, me'ai al chalalehem. That's a phrase again. That phrase appears in the original Nachem, but he's just shifted the meaning of it. Right? He's laid the focus now from Zion and from the city and its destruction to the death of Jews. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim. Again, middle of the third line. This is a new interpolation. Nekomet nikmat ircha shenatata lenu lenachala. Please avenge the city. V'kabeit et she'erit Yisrael mikol ha'aratzot asher hidachta otam sham. And bring together the ingathering of the exiles from all the places that they have gone. So for Rav Rosenfeld, the focus of Nachem needs to shift. The focus of our mourning needs to shift. In 1965, when Israel didn't have, they didn't have the Kotel, they didn't have the old city. Yerushalayim was a little backwater that nobody visited. At most, they would go for an hour or two. They go around the city, maybe they go to the Knesset, they go to Machane Yehuda. Those who were really adventurous would go to the one rooftop where they could climb up and then peek for a second and hope they wouldn't get shot by a Jordanian sniper as they looked towards the walls of the old city. And that was it. That was a 1 day or a half day, excursion to Jerusalem, and that was it. People didn't go to Yerushalayim. But even then, Rav Rosenfeld felt that I can't say the words Yerushalayim is desolate. I can't say it has no homes. I can't say it has no Jews living in it. So he needs to shift the focus. Here again, a little historical note. He published this in England in 1965. The book was republished in the 1970s. I believe 1972, and then again in 1977. It was republished by a different publisher. So in England, it was very much a local thing. Then it was published by a local publisher, I think Judaica Press. They published it. They published the entire book. They made it bigger. They put on a very fancy, colorful dust jacket on the book. And this suggestion of Rabbi Rosenfeld was deleted. If you bought the keynote book that he wrote, and you bought it from Judaica Press, a nice big thick volume, you will not find this keynote in there. You have to find an old version that was published in England in 1965. So once again, we see things happening, interesting, that there are people who are willing to think progressively, and over the course of time, there are forces beyond them that are changing some of those progressive kinds of thinking. Okay, we're going to move forward a little bit now to 1967. On the right-hand side, we have a comment from Rav Shlomo Goren, and maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my share and then reshare again. And that'll be the easiest way to get rid of this marking. So just bear with me for literally 20 seconds.
I hope that works. We'll see.
Okay, and now I'm going to share it again. There we go. Okay. So here we have, on the right-hand side of Shlomo Goren, 1967 war, June of 1967. Tisha B'Av is approximately 8 weeks later. Rav Goren says, I can't say that tefillah. He was the chief rabbi of Tzahal. He was the guy standing there at the kotel blowing the shofar. He was there at the liberation of the old city. He was there as the soldiers were raising the flag above Harabayit, where it stayed for about 15 minutes, and announced Harabayit Biadenu. And he can't say the words that are printed in every Orthodox Siddur. So he composed his own version of Nachem. And he writes as follows. And you're going to see how different his changes are from those of Rav Lichtenstein, of Chaim David HaLevi, and even those of Rabbi Rosenfeld. He writes as follows, and again, you'll see the opening line is exactly the same. The closing line is exactly the same. He quotes the same pasuk, and he closes it the same way. Like most people, if they're going to do something, they are not going to change the opening. They're not going to change the closing. But look what he does here right after the opening. Period. Not shomema. It's not desolate. It's not bizuya. It's not disgraced. Right? The other three adjectives aren't true. He looks at Yerushalayim. he looks at a liberated Yerushalayim and he says, I can't say those adjectives. So Rav Lichtenstein left the adjectives, took out the explanations of those adjectives. Rav Goren says, I can't even say those adjectives. Avela Yerushalayim is in mourning. Tzion b'mar tivkev Yerushalayim, right? He continues. So he took out an entire section and then continues the way Nachem was originally written, right? These words are there in the original tefillah, right? It's just that he's taken out the chunk in between them. Tzion cries bitterly, Yerushalayim titein kula, libi libi achal aleihem, my heart goes out for those who died. And then, look what he does after that, beginning of the next paragraph. Uli Yisrael amecha netata nachala, ulezera yeshurun orashta. Rav Goren looks and he says, how on earth can I say this tefillah and not say, thank you, Hashem, for giving us Yerushalayim back? We pointed out before that one of the things that was sort of troubling with the suggestions of Rav Lichtenstein and Rav Chaim David HaLevi is that the tefillah, so they fixed the lie, but the tefillah was rendered somewhat impotent. Rav Goren says, well, of course it was rendered impotent because all that stuff is not true anymore. So we have to add a new potency to this tefillah. And what's that new potency? It's not just Hashem, please comfort, but thank you, Hashem, for the great gift that you just gave us. Yisrael, you gave it to us as a nachala. You restored Yerushalayim to us. How can I sit here on Tisha B'Av and not acknowledge the great chesed, the great miracle that we just experienced? You gave it to us. And now comes a request. So there's the thanks, and now comes the request. Na'ara Hashem Elokeinu me'afara. So please, Hashem, shake off its dust. V'hakitza me'eretz divya. And let it rise up again from where it was. Netei eleha kenahar shalom u'chanachal shoteif kavod goyim. And please turn to it like a river of peace that is going to sweep through and bring in the honor that it truly deserves from everybody else in the world. So Rav Goren starts with Nachem, removes the lies, then says, thank you, Hashem, and here's my ultimate vision. My ultimate vision is Yerushalayim Iras Shalom, Yerushalayim that'll be shining, the Yerushalayim that shakes off its dust, and all the nevuot of Yeshaya that he had about what Yerushalayim is going to be and how the rest of the world is going to come flocking to Yerushalayim to say, please Hashem, please restore it. This is a completely different kind of tefillah. This isn't just saying, I don't want to lie, so here I'm going to... No. The nature of the tefillah has to change. Next to that, there's another version, okay? This one is written by someone named Rav Avi Giser. In Israel, Rav Avi Giser is a well-known figure. He was a rabbi of the yeshuva of Ofra for more than 30 years. He was an important figure in many educational institutions, significantly younger than Rav Goren. I think he's 67 now. So he wrote this about 20 years ago, I believe. I don't know the exact date on that, but long after Rav Goren, you'll see that there are some similarities between them. And it writes as follows: Nachem Hashem Elokeinu et avilei Tzion v'et avilei Yerushalayim v'ta'ir ha'avela. Word for word so far like Rav Goren. That's why I put them together. Right? Starts exactly like Rav Goren. V'et hamikdash ha'avel ha'charev ha'bazui v'hashomeim. Look what he does. He restores all the words Rav Goren took out. Right? Rav Goren removes the words Chareva, Bezuya, Shomema. He restores them. But he says, I can't write them about Yerushalayim because Yerushalayim is not destroyed anymore. Yerushalayim is not disgraced anymore. Yerushalayim is not desolate anymore, but the Mikdash is. So he adds in the word HaMikdash, and then he can restore a lot of the original text. And now he's going to explain what each one of those things means. Just like in the original Nachem, right? We have explanations that Rav Lichtenstein said I can't say. He says, well, now that I talk about the Mikdash, I can write my own new explanations about all these things. Avel mibli banav. The Mikdash, Rabbi, doesn't have its children anymore because they don't go up there. Ve'acharev mima'ono. It's missing its building. There's a different building there now, but the building that's supposed to be there isn't there. Va'bazui mikvodo. And yes, it is missing its kavod, because the glory that should be there no longer is. Va'shomei me'ein poked. And it is desolate because Jews don't go up there en masse. Right? Compare, right? With however many Jews do go up to Har HaBayit to what used to exist. And the rest he continues now with the regular text of Nachem. And then go to the beginning of the next paragraph. Ul Yisrael amecha netata nachala ulezera Yishurun Yerusha horashta. What did he do? He continues copying exactly word for word from Rav Goren's text. That's why I put them side by side. So he starts like Rav Goren, he ends like Rav Goren. In the middle, he adds the thanks like Rav Goren has. But whereas Rav Goren is looking at a vision of Yerushalayim restored to a glory in its international status, Rav Giser is looking at the Mikdash, and the Mikdash is still very far from that. And Mikdash is Avel, Charev, Bazui, and Shomeim. So we've gone on a little bit of a journey over here, tracing lots of different attempts to fix Nachem, but also attempts to rebuild Nachem in different kinds of ways. I'm going to share with you two other attempts to change Nachem, let's take a look at the one on the left-hand side. The one on the left-hand side was written by Rav Rabinovich, Nachum Rabinovich. Some of you may know him. He was a rabbi in Canada at the beginning of his career. He then moved to Ma'aleh Adumim, where he founded a very fine yeshiva. And he was also bothered by the text of Nachem as it existed. And this was printed for the Talmidei HaYeshiva. So you see the introduction here. I just sort of photocopied the piece. Tfilat Nachem al pi Rosh HaYeshiva, Rav Nachum Rabinovich. That's how Nusach Hamatim Li'amenu. This is a text that is appropriate for our days. Kesho Yerushalayim Nivneit. Yerushalayim is already built, or is being built, umit patachat, and is developing tachat shilton Yisrael under Israel's sovereignty. So what does he do over here? Nachem Hashem Elokeinu et avelei Tzion vet avelei Yerushalayim. Starts the same way. Rachem. Okay? Please, Hashem, have pity. Now, the term Rachem actually appears, I actually learned this morning. There are two different versions of Nachem in the ancient world. The Ritva brings that for Sfardim who say Nachem in all the tefillot, they say Rachem at night and in the morning, and then they say Nachem in the afternoon for Mincha. So the Rachem is actually borrowed from an ancient version. Rav Rabinovich introduces that over here also. Rachem b'rachamecha rabim u'v'chasadecha ne'emanim aleinu v'alamcha Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim yirecha v'al Tzion mishkan kvodecha v'al hahar ha'avel v'charev v'harus b'hashomim. Hanatun biyad zarim haramus biyad aritzim vayirashua ligionot vayechalelua ovdei psilim. From this point, and then vayitnu nivlat avadecha ma'achal of hashamayim ve'amat haaretz. Okay, what is he talking about over here? He says, please Hashem have rachamim on Yerushalayim and on Zion, without getting into what Zion is right now, but and on the mountain, Harabayit. This is beginning to sound a little bit like Rav Giser, right? There's somewhat in sync over here. Rav Giser basically used Rav Goren's template and then shifted that to add in the Beit Hamikdash. Rav Rabinovich does not use Rav Goren's template. He creates his own. Okay, Hahar, the mountain, which is Avel, Charev, Harus, and Shomim, right? And what makes it in such a terrible state? Because we don't have full sovereignty. That's what's missing. Rav Giser was talking about the Beit HaMikdash. Rav Rabinovich is not talking about the Beit HaMikdash, he's talking about sovereignty. There are others who go up there. Rav Giser said, we don't. Rav Rabinovich says there are others who do. They trample there. That's real Avelut. Right? By Yerashua Ligionot, other armies have taken it. By Yechalelua Ovdei Psilim and idolaters have desecrated it. So very similar to Rav Giser, but again, slight nuance over here with a shift from what we want to see, right, to what's wrong right now. I want to share with you one more version, and for those who want, you have another version written by Rav Auerbach. This one is actually also somewhat older. This one probably goes back to the 60s, but I want to share with you one that was written in the 2000s. Okay, and what makes it different is that it starts from a completely different place. And this one was written by a professor of Hebrew literature and piyut. Right, here's somebody who studied the keynotes, studied Jewish piyut over the course of the 1,500 years of Jewish liturgical poetry. He writes many piyutim of his own. He's quite talented, and one of the piyutim that he wrote was a piyut for Nachem. Okay, and we'll see that he starts with the same 3 words, and he closes with the same pasuk and the same closing. But the entire structure, the entire format is completely new. Everything in the middle is completely new. And I think it's fascinating to see not only that that stylistically it's new, but what is the focus of a completely different kind of Nachem. Okay, and we'll close with this. Nachem Hashem Elokeinu avelei beit kodshecha. Please Hashem comfort those who mourn the Beit Hamikdash. So he doesn't waste any time getting to what to the point. Ve'nemanei Tzion irecha, and please also bring the Chama to those Jews who are loyal to Tzion. And now he gets to the punchline. Boom, his opening sentence. It shatters all the previous preconceptions about what Nachem should be. Hakmehim l'shivat shchinatecha. It's not about the mountain. It's not about the building. It's not about the Beit HaMikdash. It's not about who's up there and who's not up there. It's about the absence of the Shekhinah. The Beit HaMikdash is simply a building. Without the Shekhinah, it becomes Avodah Zarah. For Professor Schmidman, the focus of our energies has to be to restoring the Shekhinah to Am Yisrael, restoring the divine presence so that it's palpable within the Jewish people, so it's palpable within Yerushalayim. So please, Hashem, comfort those who miss the Shekhinah, who are thirsty for the Shekhinah to come back. Ad matai teshev moria umlala uvzuyat so'eket umitchanenet. How long is the mountain going to sit there crying? The Devir daveh hechan kruvai. The Devir is one of the sections of the Mikdash. Where am I kruvim? Right? The Kodesh Kodeshim. Where am I kruvim? The Hechal, the outer, the Kodesh. Hechal homeh. Hechan nerotai. Where are my candles? Where's my menorah? Ariel, which is the introduction, which is the hallway which leads into the Beit HaMikdash. Hechan Ishai, where's my fire? Azarazo eket. The courtyard cries out, Hechan Koanai. Vahar b'mar boche, Hechan banai. And the mountain cries bitterly, where are my children? Rei Hashem v'habita. Please, Hashem. Please look. Hashev Shechinatcha l'hamromecha. Bring the Shekhinah back, please. It's like the bracha of Ritzei. Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu b'Amcha Yisrael v'Hashev et ha'avodah l'dvir beitecha. Right? Tefillah Baruch atah Hashem machazir Shechinato l'Tzion. He's taken the idea from that bracha and he's written a new version of Nachem based on that bracha. So Hashev Shechinatcha l'hamromecha. Bring back the holy fire, and the glory of your presence. Please bring it back. Please, Hashem, bring your presence back to us. So we have, over the course of 70 years, we have an evolution of the tefillah of Nachem. We have the suggestion that maybe we need, from Rav Zevin, maybe we need to start rethinking this whole Avelut business, halachically. And then we start hearing from Rav Rosenfeld, maybe the focus needs to shift because Yerushalayim is not an empty, desolate city anymore. Jews are starting to stream back, and that's even before 1967. And then we have the minimalists who say, okay, just take out the lies. And the maximalists who say, no, it's not enough to take out the lies. We have to replace it with something else. What's that something else? That something else could be, we still mourn over all those who died fighting for Yerushalayim. That something else could be, we still missing the Beit HaMikdash. That something else could be, the mountain is still desecrated because of those who trample it. Or what's missing is the Shekhinah itself. Hopefully, next year, we won't have to say any of this tefillot and won't have to write a new one.
Thank you, Tzvi. Okay, anybody have any 35-second question? Tzvi, also, if you could please send us the updated source sheet, because I think the one you sent it, you updated since you did it. So we're going to have all of them. The one we have on the website doesn't have some of this, but when you get it, you can send it to me personally. And okay, Nazir, you have 10 seconds to the question, then we have 30 seconds for the answer.
Yeah, how did the rabbi of Tzahal, who captured the Holy Mountain, felt about leaving it in light of all these prayers and expectations?
That's a very, very interesting question. He was obviously not very happy about that, especially since Rav Goren was, in those days, it was not hard to see the events happening between 1948 and 1967 as part of a messianic process. And Rav Goren was one of the leaders of that thinking. And then when they handed the keys for Har HaBayit back to the Waqf, it was devastating for him. It was devastating for a lot of people, but it was certainly devastating for him. He saw that as a pulling back. I heard, but I've not been able to confirm this in writing, but I heard that in later years, Rav Goren pulled back from some of his messianism precisely because he saw the process. He thought it was a straightforward process, a sequential process, and it became clear that it was not a sequential process, and then he had to start rethinking some of his theology. So he was really devastated by the loss of of sovereignty over Harabait.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll take a 2-minute break, and Miriam can say hello or not hello for Tisha B'Av, however you want it, but whatever. And we'll get started. Just let people, myself included, stretch for 90 seconds, and we'll get started in 2 minutes.